I believe I have made a route that is optimized for Pugging Season 1 with the Prideful affix, all 8 dungeons covered, and I'm going to be sharing them with you today in this video. And I really want everybody to understand what's going to be important about Pugging, especially with no voice, no communication, because getting these Pridefuls to spawn at the right time is going to make or break these keys. And if you do it wrong, you're going to have a lot of toxicity in the group, a lot of leaving, a lot of arguing. That's just something that you can avoid as a tank or even as just a planner of the group ahead of time. So I've made a document with a little bit of notation and a export string for all 8 dungeons. The way you do this is you download this Mythic Dungeon Tools add-on, MDT, formerly known as Method Dungeon Tools. You get the add-on, and then you go to this document, which will be down below. You go to the paste bin, you go to the paste raw data here, press Control A, then Control C to copy it. Then you go back into the game and you import it here, Control V, press OK if you want, and import. Of course, I already have a copy, so it's not going to work, but this is how you do it. Then you will have exactly what you're seeing per dungeon on my screen. Now, last time we made these in Season 4 of BFA, we had to make separate ones for teaming. There is no longer teaming affix, so if you haven't seen the affix changes, you'll want to check those out down below as well. But otherwise, check out the routes, follow along. I am going to give a little description about what's important in every route, but before we start, I want to make one thing very clear. Spawning these Prideful ads is the most paramount importance that you can do in the dungeon, especially while pugging, and I am optimizing them for boss spawns, or more so natural spawns of power, wherever we can. Not going out of my way for anything crazy, but it will alter the route and you will pull around these 20% splits. So if you're doing this on something other than a 10, you should be aware that this might be a very strange route, especially early in the season. If you're not doing a 10, people are going to ask you why you're doing this, why you're going the wrong way. At times while you're skipping things that shouldn't be skipped, and this is going to be all practice for the level 10 affix, which I would recommend. I'm going to be doing this regardless of the key level, especially these early weeks, because I want to get in the habit of this. Doing this is going to be so important that, let's put it this way, if somebody accidentally pulls a mob without you realizing it, or ends up, you slightly derivate from the route, you will have your whole route ruined, and you will have ads spawning at the wrong time, perhaps in the middle of packs, and with the case of Necrotic Wake, it will be spawning in the middle of gauntlets, and you will be wiping because of this. So it's not only important to know the route and understand where you're going at what times, but you have to understand why you're going there and what you can do to save a mistake, to the point where a single body pull or mistake along the way could actually end the key. It might not end it right then. You might aggro a second pack while fighting something and you'd be like, oh, whoa, we survived this, thank God. But you might still wipe down the road. So you have to understand this. This is the most important. There's never been an affix like this, and especially for pugging, if you are the person making the route, you need to have a mastery of this. So we're going to take a look at all 8 dungeons. We're going to go through it in order, and we're going to start with the other side. The main thing I want you to know about the other side is you can go past Hakar and go to a second platform in front of the area where you go to the second boss, the Mechagon area, and you can get extra trash and then go back. And why you're going to do this is because you want to have the right split. You're lining up the splits to get ahead, and then every one happens naturally. So this is going to be a recurring theme in these routes. You set yourself up to just naturally progress through the dungeon. If you followed me in previous expansions and seasons, you always feel like there's a kind of an air of simplicity about my approach. And some people say like it's not a competitive mindset, but for pugging, I think it's the best mindset. Because if you make it simple for your group mates, you're going to succeed easier. And if you are the tank, you're just going to get in this, sense of like almost consistency to the point of no failure. Like if you eliminate yourself as a variable, then everybody around you can play better. And that's exactly what I'm trying to focus on here in these routes. So you're going to see I also marked these things, a couple. The orange is where these splits happen. I don't know why that's doing that, but the orange is why is where these splits are happening, and the red is where I'm recommending Bloodlust. And it's going to almost always be on bosses. So why you might see a lot of people recommend bloodlusting or getting the Prideful to spawn for trash if you watch top groups and stuff. And this is great if you're in coordination. because especially on certain fortified weeks, it's just going to be way more valuable. But for me in Pugging, I feel like the most likely wipe is always going to be a boss, even on fortified weeks, because you could wipe to trash. You could pull 7 mobs and kill 5 of them and then die and come back and fight the next 2, and that's not that bad. But if you do that on a boss, if you go a minute and a half deep in a boss and die at 20%, and then you have to come back with no lust, no CDs, no food buff, no prideful, you are going to have a disband. So I do not ever want to wipe on a boss, and I think a lot of these dungeons line up really naturally to make this easier. And this is going to be one of them. So instead of just going right to Hakar, which you would do by going to this way and killing 1 pack and advancing, you're actually going to go past Hakar towards Mechagon and get the extra count you need in this route, and then go back. And you're going to get 1 prideful here. It's going to be relatively bad. It's going to be like a spawn that you don't get a lot of value out of, but you could always drag it back and try to get some value out of it. But after that, everyone is going to line up perfectly, and that is going to be the theme that we're trying to follow here. One thing to note, though, you should never go to Ardenweald first, in my opinion, because if you go there, you have a lot more difficulty getting count. So let's take a look. So really, the rest of the route looks like there's nothing to talk about. You just go pack for pack afterwards and get it. But of course, in Ardenweald, in the area with the boss, the dealer boss, there's a lot of variables and a lot of trash. And we're also trying something a little aggressive here, but it doesn't really matter what you do at this point, as long as you come here with what I believe to be, you need like 40% here, right? You're going to get 2 splits here regardless. There can be probably over 50-60% count here. I haven't added it all up, but there's a lot of trash here. So what we did once we get to this area, which is going to be the 3rd area we come to, is we're going to try to really make good use of the small fodder trash we have. I have these marked as very big pulls. You do not have to do these if you don't want. I probably won't be doing it either, but just know what is and isn't here. Like, for example, these Spriggans are not something you normally pull unless you went out of your way. You need them for count. This double pull contains a patrol, and so does this actually. The first pull also contains a patrol, so be aware of where these patrols are, and just make sure you get everything you need here, because if you get down here and you do not have 100% count before this boss, you'll have to backtrack or somehow pull some of this stuff, which is possible. But either way, the main thing you'll note here is that I'm skipping this. Now, it's possible to do this right now at the time of me making this video by going through this watery area and jumping down into the waterfall. There's a chance that they prevent that in the future, but this route is a no-fail route. You cannot fail here. You can't go over count, and a lot of the stuff that we're pulling is very easily skipped, okay? So all you need to do is just make sure you line up count, okay? So this is what I'm trying to teach you. Embark on this journey with me and find ways that you could maximize yourself, and you will find that there's some very easy ways to get the bosses killed, the big damaging elements of the dungeon to be overcome thanks to these prideful ads. So experiment within yourself. But that's the main thing. I would recommend lusting on this boss here. This is a very dangerous boss, and it always will be in a pug, because there's a lot of mechanics that require spatial awareness and just overall mechanical awareness. And I would always recommend lusting Hakar. So having a prideful ad for bloodlusts is huge. You're going to blow the doors off these fights, especially on a week that isn't very dangerous boss-wise. These bosses are going to die in under a minute, and that's just going to make your run so much smoother. So yeah, that's that. Check that one out. Halls of Atonement is the next one. This is my standard route. I've been doing this for a long time on the beta and now on live. And one thing you'll know is that we go right first. Now, I've seen a lot of people talk about not going right first or doing a variety of different things here. But I find for me, this is the most consistent option for pugging. And the main thing here is just getting good pridefuls. Again, you're going to get these very easy. So note that this first prideful is going to actually spawn again at probably the worst time in the dungeon. But what you do, you spawn it right before here. One thing to note very importantly is that there's these loyal stoneborns in this dungeon. If you're unaware, all covenants have a buff that they could do in the dungeon that dramatically empowers you in some way. And this one is summoning and spawning this ad. So it's going to be very, very important that if you don't have a vent there to do this, you do not attack these ads. And it can be harder than it looks, that they're basically going to be in the way at least 3 or 4 different stages. In fact, the route really depends on it, because one of them is actually in a pack that you might pull. It's not the end of the world at this point, but early on it will be, because if you get this extra 1.47% count, you will then spawn the Prideful in the middle of this pack instead of after it. So there's an example of where we're talking about small mistakes can really add up. And it could be the same with these groundskeepers in the back and on the sides here. If you aggro stuff that you're not supposed to pull, you will not have the trash at the right times. And that might not be a problem in most seasons, but it will definitely be a problem if you're trying to maximize Prideful. So I have them marked here too with the notes. So you basically just go right, and then you come here, clear all this out. You get some Pridefuls. The big thing here is that after clearing this pack, you'd have Prideful 3, and you'd go into boss with that, plus the Stoneborn. And that plus Lust is GG. That boss is going down like the Titanic, and it's not going to, I mean, you're not going to have any mechanics. You're going to crush this boss, you know what I'm saying? And then the same thing here. I'm recommending pulling these anyway. This is a patrol after the second boss here. You've probably seen it. It patrols this way. This is all very easily skipped, and if you want to do that, you can. But again, you need count one way or the other, and you can get it right before Echelon or Echelon. And this is another fight that if you have a big damage buff, you're going to have less mechanics. It's just going to be a lot easier. And then you go inside, and there's not really much going on here. Just again, realize that if you're over count already and you have to fight these two, it's really going to mess you up. You really do not want a Prideful here. Or I mean, if you do get one, you're just not going to have one for the last boss. But yeah, the thing is, if you run right through the center here, you can skip these ones pretty easily. And then you would just move on to this. This guy gives over 7%, regardless of if you killed the ghost or not. You know, there's people out there skipping those ghosts, but regardless, it gives 7%, and that should be the end of the dungeon's final split there, no matter what. To be over 7% over trash count is not the end of the world in this dungeon, but it would be a huge mistake, and I think it'd be hard to make, so just keep that in mind. The big thing here is this first split is going to happen at the end of this hallway, so what I've been doing is I've been running it all the way back to the start. So then as it dies, you can come over to this side, make a really big pull here, as you see, nice big triple pull with the Prideful buff, annihilate it, and then move on and get another one here, take it into the pack, and go over here, take it in the boss, blah, blah, blah. So check that out, Halls of Atonement. That's probably the easiest route to execute. Second easiest might be Miss Tirna Scithe. Now, one thing about this dungeon is that we have this maze in the middle. Hopefully you've known all about this maze for a while. I have a video on how to complete this maze, and it's even easier, honestly, the more coordination you have. So tell your friends about how to do it, and then everybody can do it while you're doing the trash, and it'll make it very easy. But I'm doing a route that is definitely not what most competitive players will do, and I think this makes it a lot easier for pugging. What you can do typically is you might skip all of this stuff here, come along this side, and then you might skip this pack, and it'll actually take you to 20% even right before the first boss. And then you have more wiggle room at the end. But for me, pugging, you can't guarantee the skip. You either need a rogue, you need some CC, shroud, stuff like this. So I'm trying to do these routes without shroud and without any complicated skipping. So instead, we're just going big pull here out of the gate. I always like a big pull out of the gate because all your CDs are up, pots are up. You could pre-pot before dungeons now, don't forget. And it will last through the dungeon and not put it on CD. So yeah, you can make a really good use out of this first pack and then just be sure to avoid these, okay? If you pull these, you're going over count and the whole dungeon is going to be wrong. So keep that in mind. We're going to have a potential here to maybe double pull here. Make sure you're getting the Night Fade buff if applicable. Take that up here, 10-minute strength buff or whatever class you're playing, into the second Prideful with Bloodlust means this guy's going down. You know what I mean? It's such a cool moment when you have it happen here. So then the maze is a little awkward. We can't control count to the percent, but I think on the average it should be about 36%. I tried it a bunch of different ways and it's almost always 35 to 36-ish. So I don't think there's any way to be any different than that, but just keep that in mind. There could be a couple variables. As long as you don't pull a pack you're not supposed to, though, you should have at least one well, you'll always have one Prideful in the middle of the maze no matter what. Even if you did the 20% route, you'd still have it during the maze. In that route they did there, they take it into Mistcaller, but I don't feel like it's that important. And in fact, in my route, you will get it for the mini boss if applicable. I'm still not 100% sure if there's always a mini boss in Mythic Plus, but yeah, if you do this, you will have it for the mini boss, which is pretty nice. And then you go do the boss and move on. And then the thing about this final part here is I go right. If you go this way here, which is left, you will have a lot more count. You'll be over by probably 5 or 6% doing this route. And this doesn't require any skips at all. You just go this way. One thing to note is these flying reavers almost always aggro when you're fighting this pack, but just be aware that if they don't, you'll be undercount. And these ones almost never interfere with me, but every once in a while they do pull just because somebody's doing something absurd, you know, but if they do, it's not the end of the world. If you get them at the end, just make sure you try to kill everything evenly and it will spawn the Prideful and you kill and go right to boss. Another great boss for Prideful. So this is one of the easiest dungeons. Just don't overcomplicate it and when you're pugging. Now, Plaguefall is kind of the opposite. This is one that I had to overcomplicate. And this is a really, honestly, not a great route. I'm not very satisfied with this one. But I think this is what we're going to end up having to do for pugging. I really want to make sure that this first boss has Prideful. It's so important to me. I've done this dungeon so many times between live Shadowlands and also beta. And this first boss, if it's blown up, it's so easy. It's unbelievable. But if it's not blown up, if you have to do a lot of these mechanics, people just aren't ready for them. They just never really see them. They don't know what to do with the ads. The boss is going to heal a lot and the tank's going to have to work really hard. So what we're doing is we're getting a second Prideful before the first boss. Follow me here. This is how you're going to do it, okay? You're going to pull these optional plague rocks, okay? There's a bunch of plague rocks hanging out. There's actually 4 of them hanging out in this first area. One is actually behind the first mob that you might spawn or you might fight. And if you feel like this is taking you more than 10 minutes to get 2 of these, you can lust on the pull. It's not great, but it's certainly better than just missing out on lust. And, you know, maybe on a fortified week it works out. But either way, just keep that in mind. You need these plague rocks. Otherwise, you will not have enough count. And you're going to get a Prideful here. What I was doing was basically this, then here, and then kind of come back around and get a big pull and then go forward. It doesn't really matter what order you do them in. You're always going to get this one Prideful that's just a little awkward no matter how you do each dungeon, but getting it at the right time sets up the rest of them. And now from now on, you're set up. So you're going to get the rest of this stuff. And then one more big little trick here. You're going to go down, get this pack, and then return, okay? So again, a little awkward. You're going to leave the first boss's area without fighting him, okay? Pay attention to that. Leave the first, you could skip this boss and do this last if you really wanted to, but you're going to leave the area, get the Prideful, take it back, blow the boss up, and he, again, with Lust and Prideful, will get slaughtered. You won't have to worry about any of the mechanics. And then you're going to come down and execute a little skip. Again, not in love with this. This trash is very easy, and it's a very dense count. You could get a lot of count here for not as much effort. You know, if you want to skip this start and you want to just push all of this count to here, it would work very well. But I'm making these without rogues in mind, without any death skips or stupid concepts that people would have to try to learn on the fly. No coordination groups are going to be very difficult for that. So make it easy on yourself. Just hug the left side. Very easy skip. I've done it a million times if you want to check it out. Pull this stuff here, then just go naturally through here. I know another reason that this isn't a great route is because pulling these individual tentacles for 1.5%, not ideal. It's not really how you want to do a Mythic Plus, but it's going to set you up to be very successful. Now, you could also try to have just gotten some count from here instead. So if you want to experiment, feel free. But just realize this 3% count is extremely important. And there's not a lot of, you know, unless you dip in and get one of these packs in the middle, there's not a lot of percentages that's going to line up perfectly. Because then after that, instead of skipping this area, you're going to have a perfect split as you fight Icus. So you clear this trash if you're unaware, make sure he's jumping around, make sure you're not in the way. Just kind of hang out on the sides. Get the Prideful to spawn and make sure you're fighting it on the edges, because if you're fighting it when Icus comes around, that's it for the key, okay? You don't want to be fighting a Prideful mob while the boss is attacking you. So just make sure that that works out and you make the split and you're good. And then you move on. Another thing here, like again, another kind of suboptimal route to lead to an optimal result, in my opinion. And you're going to skip all the shit in the middle and all the stuff on the sides. A lot of people in normal are jumping down here and running around the left side. It's, you know, flipped when you're in the dungeon, but these tentacles are here only in Mythic. So if you've done this on normal, it's not actually possible on Mythic unless you want to kill all these tentacles. So yeah, let's just do this instead. I think this is a safer play. You need 1 pack here. This is normally something you might skip. You might not even see. It's just a standard dude in a little slime hanging out. It's a little pet slime. You're going to kill it. You're going to step on it. You're going to keep moving. You're going to come down here. Things get a little awkward again. Not optimized perfectly, but optimized for the percent. You're going to get that prideful and you're going to go really strong into this boss as well, okay? Then the problem is you got to go back. You got to get extra count because there's not enough count here. You could have got it before, but then you're not going to get the prideful for the boss. You see where I'm going with this. So make sure you come back and get it. Come back here, follow the patterns, follow the route, and then go downstairs, finish things up. This note tells you that you only get a little bit percent from this, instead just 1 mob. And then you come down, try to pull all of these together. It'll make sure that you get the prideful, and then just kind of tank the prideful off the corner, because again, you don't want to pull the boss with the prideful. You want to use the boss after the prideful, and then that's it. There's also some slimes up here people were talking about trying to get. I feel like this is way out of the way. It's so, like, you'd have to go this way and then back across. So I think this idea of kind of doing this boss and then going backwards for a couple pulls is definitely on the play. You could also just try to get this mob with these 3, but this is actually really difficult to do. He's pretty far into the slime. So if you have a strong range class that can get it for you, you can do that. But as a tank, you kind of have to wade through the slime and kind of grab them. It's not ideal, I don't feel like. So I think this is what's going to work out best. That's Plaguefall. Sanguine Depths, another very straightforward one. In fact, this one is almost nothing to talk about. You literally just go pack for pack. There's nothing I could recommend that would make any difference here. Yeah, absolutely. Pack for pack. You get a couple bad splits. Like this first split is going to be on the trash instead of the boss. But if you kill this trash quick enough, you could then take a little bit of it into the boss. Just note that some of this on MDT is not right. It's a little awkward, especially this down here. This actually patrols. It doesn't say it does, but almost always you're going to encounter this pack down here, not down here. So very oftentimes you're going to have this pack first. It doesn't actually matter though. Like I said, like whichever one of these packs you get first is going to spawn the prideful, and then you would just combine the second pack that's still there with the other one. So if you get this pack, then you would combine these 2 packs. You understand? But then, yeah, again, not prideful for the boss. So you could make this happen by using a rogue skip early. But to do that, you're then off count for the rest of the dungeon. So you'd have to try to change that at the end if you still want to do that. Which is definitely a little disappointing for me, because this dungeon has the hardest bosses in the game, in my opinion. And making it happen at the right time would be ideal. But you know, you can't have everything. If you want to make it simplistic for pugging and you want to make it straightforward, then you just go in a straight line in this dungeon, and that's it, because that's all you can do. There's no optional trash. But on the bright side, you will have the final split right before the final boss, which is another one. You know, do you want to see all your friends get blown off the platform because they have no idea what they're doing, or do you want to skip all the mechanics? Let's skip all the mechanics. So anyway, Sanguine Depth, unfortunately, not a lot to talk about. Now this has a lot to talk about, okay? Spires of Ascension has a couple optional things. First things first, you're always going to get a perfect split here in front of the first boss. There's nothing you can do unless you go way out of your way to skip it, which I'm not even sure that's possible. The first area gives you the right count no matter what, and that's good because this is a hard boss. Then the question comes in, what do you do, left or right? I go right. The trash on the left I find to be easier numerically, like it should be probably quicker, and you know, you could survive it easier, but it's way peskier mechanically. And I feel like in Pugs, that's the death sentence. If you have these mobs jumping around, these guys are like literally never want to be in melee range. So you got them all separated and people are getting frustrated by that. It just causes a bad atmosphere. So go right. You as the tank control your own destiny on this route. Again, you're going to get a relatively bad spawn here, but you can't do anything about that. There's not, you know, you need to get 5 of them. So you're going to get that here. And you're going to get a pretty bad split here too. But keep this in mind, because this is actually not a bad thing at all. You can have a pretty good little area here, okay? If you wanted to try to go really big and pull all of this. But listen, the reason I'm bringing it up is because these mobs patrol from here all the way to here. And this robot pack is notoriously pesky to pull out of line of sight. So I'm telling you, this pack here is going to be probably the hardest part of any dungeon as a tank, okay? Trying to isolate one of these from the other is almost impossible. So if you come up here, guns blazing, ready to go, you get these killed, and then you get rewarded with an easy 2-pack and Prideful into this next pack, which is also a hard pack. Don't take it for granted. And at this point, you can line the Prideful up, just be sat right here waiting. You kill it, you talk to the angel, she flies you over, you kill his pack, and you could also potentially use for the boss a little bit. And then again, at the end, we have another little trick here, okay? So this is a skip, and I'm trying not to skip too many things in these routes, but this is actually really easy. I didn't actually know about it. We talked about it on stream. I looked into it, and this is really, really easy. To skip this pack, all you need to do is just climb up this little kind of like buttress on the side of the stairs and go around, and you literally just kind of go right around the pack and you come back out on the stairs here. Very, very, very easy, but maybe go try it on Heroic if you've never seen it. If you got a full group of people who've never done it, just something to keep in mind. But this is not a pack that you want to pull if you're trying to get good splits. Otherwise, you will be over count. And then again, same thing here. We are going to pull this pack, even though it could be skipped. And then we're going to go around the right side here. And again, this is as easy as the first one. There's a lot more room than it looks like there is on this add-on. And you're going to come here and you can line of sight these with these pillars, or you can just pull them and kind of grip them in and try to get them funneled in. It doesn't really matter. But at this point, you're going to get a really good split. You're going to take it to the boss, and then you're going to go backwards and get the rest of this. Okay, so a little bit convoluted, a little bit complicated, but you need to do this if you want the splits. And, you know, provided you do, this is how you'll want to do it. If you want to try to use the thing for the trash instead, you could spawn in here, and then instead of go boss, just go for this bigger pack of trash and then get the rest and go boss. But this is how I'm doing it. And end of the dungeon, obviously. You're going to have probably all of these separated, but either way, regardless, you got, you know, a big group ahead of you. You can pull them all together, 2 and 1 or whatever you want to do. Either way, you get an even 100% count. I think it's the perfect route for this, for pugging especially. So that's Spires of Ascension. Necrotic Wake, we're going to skip for now. We'll come back. Theater of Pain, another very interesting one. To know about my Theater of Pain route, we tried a bunch of permutations, since you could go either the gladiators, the the abominations, or the ghosts. Whichever route you take first will dramatically impact how the Pridefuls spawn, and the way you approach it might depend, you know, on what your group is or something like that. But what I'm doing is I'm actually going Lich first. So we're going to the Altars of Agony first, and this is not the only thing you need to be aware of. We're also taking this very specific thing here, which I have notes to explain. You're going to take this mob's orb and put it in the right slot and go to the right. And I don't know, somebody told me, like, I saw somewhere that this is random, but I don't think it is. I'm pretty sure as long as you do what I'm doing here, you're always going to have the same thing. So you're going to go right, and then you're going to end up on this platform. And then again, you're going to take this, and this time you're going to go left, and you're going to end up on this platform with these 2 death speakers. Keep in mind, you need these mobs here. If you do this, you're going to get a perfect split here, okay? And that is going to be taken into the boss, and it's going to be very beneficial because this is actually a really tough boss in Pugs. A lot of people do not understand that hand mechanic and how to deal with that. So make sure you go into this with your best foot forward. I would Lust here, Lust and Prideful. We know what happens. Then at that point, it's, you know, things could go in different directions. But I'm recommending going from there, from this boss, into the abomination area. There's not a lot of great splits ahead of us here, but this is a really interesting one. If I was going to recommend a rogue for anything, it would be here. So read this note. If you can skip this, you should, because it's going to elevate the pace of it's going to elevate the splits one pack. And what it's eventually going to do, so this would normally split into a trash pack, and it's not a great trash pack to do it on, but it is pretty pesky trash. So you could probably get both of these packs with the split, and then you'd go to the boss without it, which isn't a problem. But if you do that, what I said you could do, and then when you come back here as a blood decay, Mind Control the Ancient Captain, which is just like a slam dunk mob. It's so powerful. You get a debuff to make the mobs deal less damage to you. You also get a buff for your group to deal more damage. You will actually be under 100% count when you finish Zav the Unfallen, the final boss. And that means that you now have the option to go above and do more Dretha with either not 100% or take the mob with you as a Death Knight, kill it up here, get the split, the last 5th Prideful mob into the final boss, which is commonly considered one of the hardest bosses in the game. So on a tough trash week, you might not want to do that. On a tough boss week, you might want to do that and take the extra damage into the boss. But skipping the 5th Prideful is something that you should think about. Not going to be done in these routes. The only problem is this route overcount. And it's literally because we're so worried about making sure this first boss dies well that taking it at the right time is more important. Taking the Prideful at the right time is more important to me. So let's look about Necrotic Wake. This is the only one that is really shaky and really gets a lot easier with the rogue, or just, let's put it this way, it can invite a lot of problems, okay? So let's go through this pack by pack, because this is probably the most important thing that you're going to see and could be a major mistake. Now, when I did this, if you watched it live, you would know I really labored over this mob here. So let's talk about why that is. Because like I've been saying, if you pull the wrong mob at the wrong time, you will be off split for the rest of the dungeon. And in this dungeon, that's a wipe, because the end of the dungeon is a gauntlet, okay? These 3 packs come and they're all very dangerous. And if you spawn a Prideful during it, you cannot get out of combat. You will have the Prideful and the pack. And I think for most groups, that's going to be a wipe, or it's going to cause problems that are going to really offset your success one way or the other. So you don't want that, okay? It's a huge risk. So we found a route that it doesn't matter. It's so specific, but if we do it this way, it doesn't matter. So originally I was going to pull this, and the reason you're going to pull this is because there's a hammer here, okay? It's a very important part of the dungeon. In fact, we're going to do this whole route, especially beginning here, because you're going to get multiple buffs, and I believe you're going to take them into the boss. If you want to use them on trash, more power to you. Do whatever you want. But I like using them into boss, especially this boss. You're going to have the Kyrian buff, the abilities from on the ground in the dungeon, and Bloodlust, and the Prideful buff. This boss is literally going to just hearth. He's going to die so fast, you're going to forget he was there. It might spoil you for the future when you start doing higher keys, because this boss is really going to get deleted on lower keys. But regardless, you want to get this hammer, and if you want to use it on trash or whatever else, do whatever you want with it. I don't really care, but it's just a very valuable thing to get. The problem is, if you run over to get it without CCing this mob, it will aggro. So this is the only way I could do this route where it either included him and we were off count the whole way and we got Prideful at the end and it made a huge mess, or we excluded him and on the chance that he gets pulled, you fail that whole thing and end up off count. Okay, very specific. And the rest though is like, you can pull this. Just be aware that if you pull, these are all pats, okay? If you pull these early, you're going to be off split at the beginning, but you needed to pull them anyway for the second split, so you will not be upsetting the route. This is as foolproof as I can make it, but it's very complicated after that, okay? So don't pull anything extra in this room. If you pull this mob, which groups do, it's bad. Then you're really in trouble. But I think it's better to be in trouble with this route than in trouble with another option. Okay. Then again over here, and this is going to pull this mob. This is going to be fighting this mob. You're going to have a lot of access. You have the anima orb here, you have a hammer here, and you have a spear here. So if it's a really dangerous fortified week, you can just delete this pack. I like, again, to save these items for the bosses, but you have a lot of, a couple more options up here. Okay. Now this is where things get really weird. This is very, very weird. So you're going to come up here. You're going to fight these mobs. So you would have gotten the split here. You'd go into this dangerous pack with the Prideful plus the items, delete the pack, whatever you want to do. Then you're going to come up here. you're going to go left. So the next thing from here is here. You're going to pull this pack. And this is the pack that is like the operative pack. If you skip this, you're not going to have count. Don't forget it. I've never pulled this pack once on any difficulty, okay? So it's going to be very difficult for me to adapt to this. But if we do it right, it's going to make the perfect ending, okay? So you're going to get this. There's also a Kyrian buff here. The robot is going to be here. Bring your steward out. Whenever you see these damaged robots, you bring your steward out, make him repair it or something like that, and it's going to give you a buff. And that buff is going to be very potent. You're going to get some value out of that. So it's good. The X factor is this skeletal monstrosity, okay? So I've done everything in my power to set you up. If you pull this mob, that's it. You're done. Everything else is going to be messed up, and it's a very high health mob. It's going to be pretty possible to pull this mob, okay? So I'm just warning you now. It's going to be quite possible. Just do your best to avoid it. Wait if you have to. I think you could even kind of like go around the back here. Grab, this is a lot closer to this thing than it looks. And this kind of only pats about 3/4 of the way down this way. So I think you could actually fight this pack with this mob patrolling this way and not pull it. But it's risky, to say the least. But again, if you do this, let's not do it, okay? You really don't want to do it. So anyway, then it creates this really awkward split here as well. This is another patrol. It patrols around this area. You really got to avoid pulling this too, okay? So you pull these back. I'm going to grab these, pull these back, fight the Prideful here, and then you can go forward. You can get all of this with the Prideful. Very easy. Hop over this little felled pillar thing here. Kill this pack, go on to the boss, do whatever you want for the rest of the dungeon. The main thing here is that you get these splits right. And we set ourselves up to do this, okay? So you come up here, you get all of this together. It's almost inevitable. It doesn't look like a pull you want to make, but it's a pull you're going to make regardless many times. Both of these patrol. These literally don't give count. And these are a bunch of fodder mobs, but two really dangerous mobs. The collectors, make sure you're interrupting. When you make this pull, you need interrupts on both of these. Don't let them get their casts off. And then you go over here for a quiet little split. You get it. And if you want to pull both of these, go for it. Whatever you want to do, however strong you think you are, go for it. The main thing is you have now, if you executed this right, you've set yourself up for 100% count, and you are going to get it at the end of the gauntlet, not during it. Every other permutation I tried to finagle either got it during the gauntlet or risked a single early, easy mispull that caused it to happen during the gauntlet. I could not find a way around it other than end the dungeon and then get trash, which, like I said, is not a bad option. It's really not, but we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that today. We're just going to go through this dungeon this way, and it's a little awkward in the middle. But if you pull it off, you're going to love this, because then having the buff for Stitch Flesh, I'm telling you, you have the buff. And, you know, maybe you lust. I don't know the timings, depending on what key level you're doing, but you probably won't have lust. If you throw the spear at Stitch Flesh when he comes down, that's a massive damage taken increase for the boss. That plus the buff from Prideful. It'll be almost over by the time it happens. It'll be about probably 20 seconds left. You're going to annihilate this boss, and you're going to one phase the fight, and you're going to love it. So do that, and that's it. And then you're done. Final boss you can lust on, and you're done. And that's it. That's 8 of 8. All dungeons done. If you have any questions, let me know. Some of these are a little weird. Some of them are really easy. Halls of Atonement. Sanguine Depths is literally just a straight line. Theater of Pain is just a little bit of a choice you make, and then you're good. But they're setting you up for easy splits at the right time. And I think this is the best way to pug. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next one.